What's up, guys? 2-1 last night as one of the games got rained out. Seattle and Colorado got rained out, unfortunately, because I did like that side. Houston Astros got there in the other similar situation to that against the team returning home for a road trip, who was a bad team and a home underdog on the road trip return. New Orleans Pelicans got there in the late game. Nice. That was a nice, easy one. Although it seemed like they were trying to throw it away late in the game. They let a 20-point lead slip down to 7 in what seemed like a very short period of time. It's like, come on, guys, let's put this game away. Although they did, and Crochet just had an awful start for the White Sox. That did not go well. I mean, the entire start really hinged on he gave up 2 3-run home runs, both to hitting bombs out there. If those hadn't happened, the game could have been a bit different. Although, of course, the White Sox offense didn't help him at all and scored nothing. So, we'll move on to today. I'm going to try to keep it very focused here, very selective here. And hopefully my read on these is going to be good because I'm going to have 2 MLB totals. I'm going to be on one NBA game. NHL, I believe, doesn't have any games until tomorrow. Or no, wait, they do. Excuse me. Wait, what am I saying? I'm going to the Bruins tonight. NHL has 2 games today at this point, I believe. The Islanders and Carolina. Carolina's a big favorite, up from minus 210 to minus 240. They are public, 84% of the tickets, only 82% of the cash. But obviously, they're a huge favorite for a reason. Carolina, the much better team and defensive team. I don't really have a read on that one. Don't want to get involved in that. And then Toronto and the Bruins. Bruins are the public team as well with 65% of the tickets, but they do have 83% of the cash, even though it looks like the lines ticked down from minus 128 to minus 127. I believe the Bruins are 3-0 or 4-0 against Toronto this year. So I'm pretty sure they season swept Toronto this year. So the way that the bracket sets up, even though something tells me just not to like the Bruins' chances, but they're playing Toronto, and then if they get Florida in the next round, the Bruins, I believe, swept the season series against both teams. They're either 7-0 or 8-0 combined against those 2 teams. Not to say they're going to sweep these series or anything like that, or even necessarily win them, but it seems like maybe they have a matchup edge in those series at least. I'm not really sure. I got to figure out what I want to do in my hockey bracket on ESPN, but the hockey brackets are just insane. NBA, significantly easier to predict which teams are going to win because the game is not as close a game as hockey is. But I'm not going to be involved in either of these. I hope that the Bruins do win, but we'll see what winds up happening there. NBA, some interesting things going on here, man. You have the 70. Well, which game should we talk about first? Magic Cavs is the first game up. We'll talk about that. Cavs are up from 4.5 to 5 as a home favorite. 77% of the tickets, 75% of the cash. Cavs are the public team, of course, and it looks like they have a little bit less of the cash, although it looks like the line's moved up on them. My lean would be a little bit to the Cavs here just because experience does matter when it comes down to this, and I think experience did factor into that Heat Chicago game last night as well as the injured player theory, I think, came into play in both of those games, which I didn't want. The public, I thought, was just shitting on the Bulls too much in that game, but the injured player part of it with Butler, I just thought was going to motivate the Heat a bit, so I couldn't get involved in that one. Plus, as I forgot to mention in yesterday's video, the experience edge was certainly on the side of Miami in that one, and I think it showed. So experience does matter a lot. The Cavs are one of these teams that has more experience. Magic, much younger team. This is the first time they made the playoffs in quite a while, and they've had a good season. I'm sure they're excited to be here, yeah, but something tells me the Cavs are going to wind up getting the better of them in the series, and that is the way that I would lean in this one, even though it looks like they are public and the cash discrepancy is against them a little bit. At 3:30 in the afternoon, these are all Eastern time. Well, I'm talking about these in order, but this is the game I'm going to be on, the Suns and the T-Wolves. I'm going to be on the Minnesota T-Wolves in this one, even though the Suns have completely dominated the T-Wolves, not just this year. I think this year they were 3-0 against them, but if you look at – I was just looking at games that Anthony Edwards has played in. I believe these might have been all from Minnesota, but going back a ways, he's 2-11 against the Suns in his career, I believe, and most of those are with the T-Wolves. So the Suns have really totally dominated the T-Wolves recently, but the T-Wolves have been not a very good team for a while. Now I think they keep improving. Of course, we saw last year they got into the playoffs, and I think they were the 8th seed, if I remember correctly, against were they the 8th seed against the 1 seed Denver? Is that how it shaked out last year? I don't even remember exactly. But I think that I seem to remember them giving Denver like a scare in the opening round or something like that. But anyway, the T-Wolves, I do think they're improving a little bit, so I think you can like put that aside a little bit, even though I used a similar thing as part of my handicap yesterday with New Orleans having dominated Sacramento this year to the tune. Now they're 6-0 against them and won almost all the games by double digits, I think, except for one. I think they won by double digits again last night. I forget. It was right around 10. But this one, I think, is a little bit different. This one's going to be a zigzag type of spot as well. The T-Wolves are sitting at 1.5. They have 68% of tickets with 79% of the cash. It does seem – I'm surprised the T-Wolves are as public as the percentages are making them seem here, because I saw a lot of the talking heads liking the Suns here. And overall, I do actually think I'm probably taking the Suns to get through this series in my bracket, because they do have the experience edge. They got Kevin Durant. I mean, they got some older guys on this team. I think they have more experience with some of these playoff runs recently. They made a longer run in the playoffs. The T-Wolves are still a young team, kind of getting a little bit better, seemingly year after year. But because I do think the Suns are going to potentially win the series, and especially because of what I just said, where the Suns have really had the better of this matchup. But in this specific game, I don't like it, and I think the Suns are being overvalued coming into this one. And as I was saying, it's a zigzag spot. The Suns just won at Minnesota, I believe, on the final game of the regular season last Sunday. That was the last time these teams played. Same matchup, same arena. They played in Minnesota, and the Suns absolutely blew them out. So the Suns have just really had the better of the T-Wolves. But I think that this is going to be the one spot where the T-Wolves, they're going to be the team that has the adjustments to make off of that. If you're the Suns, what do you have to adjust after that game? So I think we're actually getting a zigzag in game one of a series here, where I thought you got a zigzag in the play-in last night with New Orleans as well, but I think this is also going to be a zigzag. Looking at the stats in that game for the Suns, they shot like 55, maybe even more than 55% from three-point range, and the T-Wolves had like 20-something turnovers. They had almost double the Suns' turnovers. That's not going to happen again, man. Those are both kind of complete outlier, like fluke stats. I don't think there's going to be that much of a turnover discrepancy, especially with the T-Wolves being the home team. Usually the home team does not lose the turnover battle like that, and usually the road team does not shoot that well from three-point range. So I think we're going to see a regression in both of those stats, and it's going to be not as much of a blowout for the Suns in this one. I'm going to be on the Minnesota T-Wolves. I think you can get them at -1 in this one, so that's what I'm going to do there. Then moving on to the other two games, the night games, evening games, 76ers and Knicks. Knicks are up from 2 to 3.5, 67% of the tickets, 74% of the cash. I actually don't really agree with that move in the Knicks game. I think the 76ers are the better team. They've been almost unstoppable with Joel Embiid. People just saw the 76ers not look that great against the Heat. They were losing the whole game and almost lost to the Heat. But I actually think that game helps them, because the Knicks have been off for a longer period of time. The Knicks have just been sitting around waiting. And I think the fact that the 76ers, this is kind of like what we talk about with the play-in games in the college basketball tournament or whatever. When that team has a play-in game, it's like sort of almost like a game already in that tournament, or in this case in the playoffs or whatever. So that team has played more recently, so it kind of helps them get that momentum. And if you're the 76ers here and you barely got by in that game and you're a home favorite and you almost lost, you get by, you get that win. That gives you a little bit of confidence. It gives you momentum, and it actually kind of spurs you to Spurs. It kind of spurs you to, they're not in the playoffs. It kind of spurs you to focus a little bit more after you know you didn't play that good a game. So I actually like the 76ers in this one, but the market does look quite against it. I think the 76ers are the second best team in the Eastern Conference, man. And I think they're going to win this series against the Knicks. Sixers also do have, I would say they have the experience edge too, even though the Knicks, I mean, yeah, they have Jalen Brunson. He's very good. They've been in the playoffs recently, but the Sixers, I think, have more playoff experience than that. I just think they have a bit more experience, and they have the better team. Like I said, with Embiid, they've been virtually unstoppable. I think they're like 32-5 or 32-6 with him or something like that. The Knicks, This line is telling you that the Knicks are actually the slightly better team, and I just don't agree with that. I think you give them a couple for home court. Maybe you give them a little bit extra for home court in a game one like this. Game one, the crowd comes out. They get a little bit rowdy. Madison Square Garden. It's going to be a big crowd there, but still. Phillies fans are also probably going to travel. It's not very far for them to travel either, so it'll be interesting, but I do lean to the Sixers in that one. And then the late game, the West game, that's later at 8:30 p.m. my time, Lakers and Nuggets. Lakers also are a team that got through the play-in, of course. Nuggets are up from 6 to 7.5 now. 54% of tickets and 55% of the cash on the Lakers. I don't want to get involved in this one because there are a lot of things that I think are conflicting in this one. The Nuggets, obviously, they're the better team. They're at home. The Lakers, they may struggle, going into elevation. It's not really something that they're totally used to. So there are a bunch of edges for the Nuggets, of course. So those edges are mostly built into the line here. For the Lakers, though, they do have that advantage where they did already play in the play-in, and the Nuggets have been waiting around. So I think the Lakers have an edge there where they've gotten that game out of the win under their belt already. They get that game out of the way. They've won, get a little bit of confidence from that, get to go into this game now. And the Lakers, this is going to be revenge for the Lakers because the Nuggets beat them in the Western Conference Finals last year. And I think the Nuggets had an easy time of it, if I remember correctly. What was that? Only a 5-game series? Was it? Did it go longer than that? I don't remember. Actually, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it went longer. But it is going to be revenge for the Lakers. And if anything, if revenge is going to matter at all in a sport like the NBA, it's going to be playoff revenge, where the Lakers know the Nuggets are the team that ended their season last year. Now they get to face them again in the playoffs. So I do think that is going to be a motivating factor for the Lakers. But then you do have the fact that the Lakers are just not the better team either, and they're just getting older by the day. Really, their best players are certainly not young. Nuggets have a lot more youth, and I think they have more depth on this team as well. So in a 7-game series, I don't see the Lakers being able to actually get that done. In game one, though, getting 7.5 points, that's kind of a different story, though, with the Lakers having played the play-in. I think my slight lean would actually be to take the points with the Lakers in that one, but I think that's the weakest out of all of them. So and not commenting on the totals, but game ones, I can just say in general, in games one of the playoffs, you tend to get intense defense with these two teams coming in. They're going to want to try to win this game. I think that the unders are the way to look in game ones in general, but in the two games where you don't have teams that played and play, and so Magic Cavs and Suns T-Wolves, I think the under in those is probably stronger than in the other games. So I would look towards the under in both of those games. With those teams having been off for a while, it could mean their offense is maybe slightly rusty and they're ready to play defense. The defenses are rested for those teams. So I think that tends to be the case there. Whereas then in game two, you kind of get the opposite, where there's a quick turnaround time. The defenses are no longer in a spot where they're rested. But coming into game one, it's going to be intense defense, playoffs starting, maybe some offensive jitters. So I do like unders generally, but especially in Magic Cavs and Suns T-Wolves and those. And then if I were to rate, I'm not playing any of those, but that's the way I would look. And if I were to rate how strong I think these plays are on the sides, obviously I think the Minnesota T-Wolves is the strongest because I'm playing it. Then I would say probably the second best would be the 76ers plus the points, then the Cavaliers minus the points, then the Lakers plus the points. That would be the way that I would rate them, even though those two that I ranked in the middle there are actually going against what you see in the market right now, which I just don't understand what the market is doing there. And we got baseball today. I'm going to be on two totals in baseball, and I'm going to try to just keep this kind of straightforward here. I'm going to be on an over. You know me, I take mostly unders. I'm the undertaker. I know I've jinxed myself, man, because I think I'm undefeated on full game overs in baseball so far this year. I'm 8-0, 9-0, whatever. I've lost a couple of the first 5 totals, which those get a little bit more dicey. I'm going to play 2 full game totals here, and hopefully I don't get screwed on these. I'm going against the market in this Milwaukee-St. Louis game. I'm going over the total in this one. The number looks like it's gone up from 8 juice to the over to 8.5 juice to the under. So it does look like the numbers actually moved up slightly, but I do see 81% of the tickets on the over and 58% of the cash on the under. And I just don't understand this. You can get this at over 8.5 at even money right now. I think it's probably the best price on it. There isn't that much of a difference between 8 and 8.5, as I continue to point out. You can get over 8 as well, but it's juiced. It looks like the best is juiced up to like minus 118. There's not much of a difference between 8 and 8.5. As I keep saying, the odd numbers are the numbers that matter more in baseball, because when you have a tied game, of course, getting to that odd number is what breaks the tie. So the 7, the 9, those are kind of the key, maybe even 11. Between 8 and 8.5, not that much. So I think the over 8.5 at plus money is a little bit more valuable than over 8 at minus 118 or whatever. And looking at this matchup, I don't agree with what I see in the cash discrepancy right now, though I don't know if the cash discrepancy is accurate, because we see that the number on the total has actually gone up very, very slightly. Yesterday, these two teams played into extra innings. They played 10 innings, and it was a 2-1 game. So I think if recreational bettors are going to come in and see this, they're going to say, oh, these teams played a 2-1 really low-scoring game. There were only 10 hits total in that whole game, and it went an extra inning, 10 innings, and they still only scored 3 combined runs. But yeah, that's where I think you get a little bit of value on the number playing the over in the next game in a spot like this. When you are coming off an extra inning game that was low-scoring, that low score may be a little bit misleading. You also got to look at the starting pitching, and Freddie Peralta pitched for the Brewers yesterday. He may be their best starter. He had a good start. He was good. Kyle Gibson was actually good for the Cardinals, even though I don't think he's very good, really. He got away with 4 walks in that game, but he didn't allow many hits. So the starters both did well. But you got to look at the starting pitching matchup, man. And the starting pitchers in this game I'll talk about in a minute, they're much worse than what the starting pitching matchup was yesterday. So I think you get those there. I mean, that's factored into the line, but I don't think it's factored in enough, really. So I think yesterday's result might be skewing a little bit. People look at this, oh, they only scored 3 runs yesterday. Yeah, but Milwaukee actually has a pretty good offense, man. They could score. St. Louis, I don't think, is really the worst offense either. I mean, they got Goldschmidt there and Arenado. I mean, their offense is not that bad. So I think that score yesterday was more of a result of just a couple of pitchers who were on their game, pitched pretty well. But then also it was a close game and it went extra innings. So that means that extra pitchers got used. Both teams used 4 relievers yesterday. So their bullpens are not in the best rest shape here, especially Milwaukee had to use both teams had to use some of their best relievers. Milwaukee, I believe, had to use a closer. Both teams used some of their better relievers. So the bullpen situation looks like it's kind of conducive to an under coming into today too. So that's why I like it, man. When you had a low-scoring, kind of misleading, I mean, it wasn't actually misleading yesterday, but it was just the fact that you had good pitchers pitching in that game. So when you had a low-scoring game in one particular game, every matchup is different, man. And it went into extra innings. That means the bullpens got used a little bit more. And because it was low-scoring, you're probably going to get a little bit more value on the total in the next game, looking to play the over. And then that's what we have here. So both bullpens not in a good rest spot coming into this game, in my opinion. And then the starting pitching matchup is where you look at it and you say, yeah, we want to play the over here. DL Hall pitching for Milwaukee. I don't think that he's very good. He has a 7.11 ERA and 2.13 whip this year. Really bad numbers so far this year. I just don't think he's a very good pitcher in general. He's got 10 strikeouts, 5 walks this year, and he has allowed 4 home runs, so he's got to keep that down a bit. But he's also allowed 10 earned runs and 22 hits in 12 2/3. There's nothing to like about this, really, man. Even though he did only allow 2 earned runs in his first start and 3 in his second start, his starts have also not been starts going deep into games either, man. He's only made it through the 5th inning in 1 start in that second start against Seattle. In the other 2 games, he only went 4 innings and 3 1/3 innings, and then 5 1/3 in the one where he actually made it the furthest. So he's not going deep into games. He's not pitching well. His stats have been bad. This is his first season where he's been a starter, man. He only had 1 major league start prior to this season. It was with Baltimore in 2022. He's a young guy, but he was a reliever last year. I mean, he didn't even pitch much last year either. So, I mean, yeah, you could say, well, he's a young guy. He's kind of unfamiliar to these opposing hitters, so maybe he's going to improve. Yeah, but we haven't seen that yet. And his ERA, his bad stats this year have to factor into what this total is, right? But it looks like the total's too low, that being the case. Like, how you have a guy with a 7-something ERA and the total's this low, which, again, that would kind of indicate to like a professional bettor, well, hey, there's something going on here. Maybe that means we should take the under here, but I just really don't think so. There's nothing to like about what Hall's done in the majors so far. No offense to him, but then he's facing the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have actually seen him before a little bit. 4 of their hitters have seen him before, and they're because he was on the Brewers, so he was in their division. So it's not like they've never seen him before at all. So they are at least vaguely familiar with him because he was in their division last year. I think they probably saw him in relief roles with the Brewers. Or no, wait, excuse me. He's on the Brewers now. What am I saying? He was on the Orioles before. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about right now. But somehow some of the Cardinals hitters have seen him before. Excuse me. He's in their division now. I'm sorry. My mistake. But somehow they're 2 for 5 off of him lifetime. So they have seen him before. He has no strikeouts against them. Also no walks. I don't know what to think about that. But he does, yet again, he's given up too many hits, man, in this small sample size of 400 batting average and 800 OPS just in 5 at-bats. But I just don't think his stats are very good. Then on the other side, you get Miles Mikolas pitching for the Greek Freak. Oh, that's the wrong sport. He's pitching for St. Louis. He's a guy towards the back end of his career now. He's getting a bit older. He's had some decent years in the majors for sure. I mean, his career 1.19 whip is actually not bad, but he's not a strikeout guy. He's kind of a control pitcher, kind of a junk pitcher. Really low strikeout numbers. You know, I kind of like to go against pitchers that have numbers like that. This year, he's been struggling. 5.82 ERA, 1.43 whip, 15-7 strikeout walk ratio. Again, that's too many walks. In 21 2/3 innings, he's allowed 14 earned runs and 24 hits. All of that's not good. And he's made 4 starts, and he's only gotten through 5 innings in 2 of the 4 against Philly, who's actually not that bad, and against San Diego, who that was at San Diego, so that's a more pitcher-friendly park, at least. San Diego, not really a terrible team, but still, that was kind of a more pitcher-friendly type of scenario in that one. And the games that he really did bad were against decent hitting teams, really, in the Dodgers and Arizona, but still, I don't really trust Mikolas. And then looking at his pitching against Milwaukee over his career, not good, man. 17 for 54 is what they are off him with 5 doubles, 2 home runs. He's got 9 strikeouts, 4 walks against him. Too many walks, too. That's a 315 batting average and 881 OPS in a decent size sample there, decent sample size. So I don't like that. So I'm going to take the over in this one for all those reasons. Both starting pitcher. I don't trust either starting pitcher in this one. I think it's decent enough that I think we're going to wind up seeing some offense now, and that's an afternoon game in St. Louis. And then I'm going to be taking it under in game 1 of the doubleheader with Miami and Chicago. I'm actually going under in this one, and this is kind of the reverse of that other game that I just talked about. Yesterday, this was an 8-3 game, so a high-scoring game. Cubs with an 8-3 win, but the pitching really was not overused that much in the game yesterday. Cubs only used 2 relievers, each for 2 innings apiece. So because it was a blowout game, both teams kind of used like a couple of their relievers that are kind of more long relief situation type of guys. Miami used a couple of their relievers for 2 innings as well. So I think the bullpen situation is not horrible coming into this one. So neither team used a ton of their relievers yesterday, and it wasn't really like the best of the best relievers that they have for either team. So I think that might help this as far as the under is concerned. And then, of course, they're going to be looking at the starting pitching matchup in this one coming into this one. You got Luzardo pitching for Miami. Luzardo, I like him. I think he actually has good stuff. Like, he has definitely good strikeout stuff, which I like. But he's definitely struggled on and off. But this year, I think his numbers are actually misleadingly bad. He's 0-2 so far this year with a 7.65 ERA and 1.55 whip. So that's bad. 21 strikeouts in 20 innings is fine. 21 hits isn't even that bad in 20 innings, but he's allowed 10 walks, that's terrible. He's been wild. He's got to keep that down. And 17 earned runs, 5 home runs, that's really bad. So he's got to keep those numbers down, man. His last 2 starts have been quite bad, but it was also against the Yankees and the Braves, and those are teams that have pretty potent offenses. So it's a small sample. I don't think there's that much you can take away from this. He had a good start against Pittsburgh in his first start. His second start against Anaheim wasn't that bad either. His strikeout rate is pretty good, but he's been getting bombed, man, as far as he's given up kind of an outlier number of home runs. That's a lot of home runs to have allowed so far in this small sample size. And that's not really something that's that sustainable, I don't think. And that's somewhat skewing his ERA up a bit and leading to some of those runs that he's allowed. But since he's been with Miami, if you take out the 2021 season, the last 2 seasons, 2022 and 2023, he was quite good, really. And last year was his first full season as a starter, really. He had a 3.63 ERA 1.22 whip. That's not bad. And 208 strikeouts in 178 and 2/3 innings. 55 walks is a little bit high, but still good strikeout walk rate. 3.8 strikeout walk ratio. That's pretty good. 3.1 over his career. He's got 522 strikeouts in 465 and a third innings over his career with 168 walks. So again, a little bit wild, but the strikeout rate for him is quite good. He has good strikeout stuff. 1.27 whip on his career. Not horrible. And then looking at his stats against these Cubs hitters, even though they do have some good hitters on this team, they're only 11 for 54 off him lifetime with 3 doubles and a home run and a triple, I guess, so 5 extra base hits. He has 18 strikeouts against them, which is pretty high, but 9 walks. Again, too many walks, but still it's a 204 opponent batting average in a decent sample size against these hitters, and a 669 OPS. That's not high, really, so he's been pretty good against these Cubs hitters, so I like that. I like Luzardo. And for this game to get over, I think you're going to need both offenses to be able to kind of get it going and push this thing over. And I just don't see that happening with this pitching matchup. On the other side, the Cubs have Assad pitching. No, not the ruler of Syria. Javier Assad. He's been decent so far. I mean, he's a young guy. I think his debut season was last year. Maybe it was the year before that. He made a lot of relief appearances actually last year, but he's a young guy and he's got decent stuff. I bet on him a couple of times against offenses who are unfamiliar with him, and that is the case here as well. And he's been decent this season too. As I said, 2.16 ERA, 0.96 whip so far. He's got 18 strikeouts and 5 walks and 16 and 2/3. Too many walks again, but still that's a nice high strikeout rate. Only 11 hits allowed, so he hasn't been that hittable. So I do like that. So that's pretty good. He hasn't allowed more than 2 earned runs in any start so far this year, so I like that as well. Although he hasn't faced like the best lineups really either in Colorado, San Diego, and Seattle, but still pretty impressive numbers so far in the season. On his career, he's got a 2.97 ERA, 1.25 whip. That's not bad. Strikeout rate a little bit low though, 142 and 163 and 2/3. Last year it was a little bit better, 94 and 109 and a third in his season where he was like a starter for about half the season, 3.05 ERA last year, 1.23 whip. All of it is only good for a 2.2 strikeout walk ratio on his career, though. The 66 walks on his career in 163 and 2/3 innings is too high for sure. So he's been a bit wild. Got to get that command under control, but still, I like it. And maybe he's being a little bit undervalued here, maybe just because people still don't really know his name. And I think we're getting a little bit of value on the under for those reasons, I think. Even though Assad has good stats this year, I think it's a case where people just don't really know who he is. And then you're also getting Luzardo, who just doesn't have good numbers so far this year. And his numbers are a lot worse than what they are in his career. And I trust the larger sample size more so, of course, than like 3 or 4 starts so far. Then you got Assad versus Miami. Only 2 of their hitters have ever seen him before, and they're 0 for 4 off him with no walks and 2 strikeouts. So a clean board off of them so far in a very small sample size, but that also brings that means that there's that unfamiliarity aspect to it. So most of the hitters on the Marlins, and the Marlins don't have a good offense to begin with, but most of the hitters have not seen Assad before. So I think that's going to be an advantage to him, to Assad in that matchup. So I like the under. And then looking at what's going on in the market on that one, that's the afternoon game because we do have a doubleheader in that one. The line is actually ticked up from 8 to 8.5 juice to the under, it looks like, with 56% of the tickets on the under, but also 68% of the cash on the under. So even though it's ticked up a little bit, it looks like on the number, it does also look like the cash discrepancy is on the under in this one. I found you can find under 8. It's at even money right now still at some spots. It looks like maybe you can't find that anymore, but you can still find under 8 at a cheap, or no, you can still find that actually. I see plus 100 out there, minus 102 and minus 110 out there at some of the books. So that's going to be it, man. The under 8 in that one. And then I was tempted to also play the under in the night game between these two as well, with Rodri Munoz pitching for Miami. He's making his major league debut, and then Imanaga pitching for the Cubs. You know, I've talked about him before. He hasn't allowed a run yet this year in 3 starts. He's been excellent. And of course, both of those pitchers, because Munoz is actually making his major league debut and Imanaga is new this year. So neither opposing offense has ever seen those opposing pitchers before. So I do actually like the under in that game as well. And it does look like 50% of tickets are on the under, but 76% of cash on the under, even though it looks like that line is actually ticked up from 8 juice to the over to 8.5 juice to the under, so a very small move. But it looks like the cash discrepancy is on the under in that one too. But a couple of things that don't make me want to play the under, in that one, even though it is a situation where because it's a doubleheader, and I think because it's a doubleheader, you actually might get some of the hitters might be rested in one game or the other too. So that actually kind of lends itself to an under in both games. But if you think that the hitters are going to be kind of like tired out coming into the second game, you could maybe say, well, that might lead to an under. But the reason I don't like the second game as much is, of course, you don't know how the bullpens are going to be used in the first game. The bullpens might get used up in the first game and not be in a good spot in the second game. So I don't like that aspect of it. That's a little bit of an issue for me as far as taking the under in that one. And then also, even though I really like Imanaga, so it could be a play on the Cubs. So the Cubs are also a huge favorite in that game. Imanaga been quite good so far, and Miami's never seen him before, so some huge edges to him. But I don't trust the other side of it, Munoz, even though he's also never been seen before by the Cubs hitters. It's his major league debut. Looking at his scouting report, he can get up to like 100 miles per hour on his fastball, so he can throw real hard. But it looks like he's projected to be like a relief man. It looks like he's not very good at being in the starting role and like getting deep into games or whatever, even though he does have really good stuff as far as like having really high heat. It does seem like he's like really wild, and he's also been too hittable. So I don't like his numbers in the minors that much. His ERA and his whip are just too high, even though strikeout rate's pretty good. There are things to just not like about that, and the fact that he's projected to not even be a starter in the majors, really projected to be a reliever. He's coming up, I think, because they need some guy to start in the doubleheader here in the which I think is the makeup game or whatever. So that would make me hesitant on that one, but I will be on the under in the first game of that series. That's going to do it for me, man. Hopefully some good information there. Those games one more time in the NBA playoffs: Minnesota T-Wolves -1, and the two totals in Major League Baseball: Milwaukee and St. Louis over 8.5 at +100. It looks like, and then in the afternoon game, game one between Miami and the Cubs, which is Luzardo against Assad. That game under 8 at +100. That's going to do it, man. Peace. Go Bruins.